Close your eyes. Lengthen your spine. Extend your shoulders outwards, roll them to the back, bring them in line with your spine. Pull your head back towards so that it's aligned with the shape of your spine. Tuck your tailbone inside. Now visualize your entire body with your eyes closed and question your posture. Ask yourself if you're sitting straight right now. If there are any adjustments that need to be made. Go ahead and do it yourself. Now finally, after you've relaxed and after you maintain the posture, take a few moments to observe your breath and observe how powerful the effect of the breath is on the mind. Ensure your breath is soft, subtle, deep, and your exhalations are long and consistent without any interruptions. Now interlock your hands in front of your chest. Extend your arms upwards, lengthen your spine. Inhale when you do that. While maintaining the length in your spine, slowly bring your hands down in front of your chest in Namaskara Sthiti. We're going to chant the Gayatri Mantra together. So very slowly take a deep inhalation. Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo yo nah prachodayat. Having absorbed the effect and vibration of this mantra, let's generate some energy between our hands by rubbing our palms against each other. Finally, once you feel the energy, cover your eyes with your palms. Try to create a vacuum around your eyes. Inhale when you have the hands on your eyes. Keep your eyes closed. Massage your face, the back of your neck, shoulders, elbows, knees, wherever you wish to transfer this energy to. Once again, before you open your eyes, fold your palms, bow down to the universal truth, and with a few blinks, open your eyes. Namaste. Good morning. Welcome to today's session. Today we are going to study the human anatomy of the vertebral column or the spine. Now, what do we know about the spine? What is the role of the spine in your lives? What your life would be like if you didn't have a spine in your back? What would have been different? You wouldn't? It would have been difficult to do any of it, right? Yes. It would have been very difficult to create a structure inside the body as such. To stand, posture, framework, all of it, everything makes sense if you have the spine in the picture. But if you do not have a spine in the picture, like I said, your lives would have been more or less like a octopus or a squid, a completely spineless creature as such. It would not have the shape that we have. The spine is what makes us different than animals. in principle, monkeys and us, we are more or less cousins, right? We have somewhere evolved from monkeys, and on a similar level, even though monkeys they lack the ability to lengthen their spine, human beings have evolved to an extent that they are able to lengthen the spine so that they can differentiate themselves from animals as such. Even though we are animals still, um, the yogic culture has taken the spine to another level. It is said that the superiority of animals, or the superiority of us humans is more than animals, just because we can keep the spine straight as such. If it wasn't for a straight spine, then this kundalini awakening, this spiritual liberation that we speak, the enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, samadhi, whatever, it would have been impossible for us, because we would still be struggling to keep our spine straight. That would have been the first challenge, and to some extent I think that monkeys, they are trying to copy us as human beings. There are different levels of monkeys. There are so many different categories, different types of monkeys. But if you just pay attention to the monkeys, then here in India especially, you can find that there's that gray category of monkeys which is called as langurs out there. Gray ones, the black-faced monkeys, they are more or less common as such in every part of India. And the other common category of monkeys is that brown monkey, the macaw monkey that we have, which is the more common monkey as such. Now, can you find out any differences between these two types of monkeys? Even though they are both animals to us, we simply categorize them as simple monkeys. But if you've ever observed the behavior, the nature of these two monkeys, and is there any difference between the brown monkey and the gray monkey? What? They are more straight as compared to the brown monkeys.
Yes.
Behavior wise, what is the difference between the gray monkey and the brown monkey?
It only was that this gray monkey. Brown, it is near to our features, like gestures.
Gesture per se. What if I tell you that the gray monkeys, they go to work in Delhi?
Work.
Work.
Yes, yes.
Yes, they have to work in Delhi. They go to work in Delhi. They are professionals in Delhi.
Oh, in Delhi,
Yes, in Delhi.
in the circus and zoo.
Not like that. No. In circus and zoos, they are still required to be animals, right?
Okay.
I'm talking about the grey monkeys riding motorcycles to work. I'm not kidding. I can prove that. I can actually show this to you. Grey monkeys. I have a photo of that.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. They are a lot smarter than the brown.
They are much smarter, more different. But how can you justify an animal sitting comfortably going to work in a metro city like that? So understand this: the brown monkeys, which are always chaotic, they are thieves. They're animals, right? They're fighters. They do not care about anything. They'll see something, they'll smell something, they just try to snatch it and go away. They're a mess anywhere you go. In Delhi societies and all of these places, colonies, whenever these brown monkeys they enter in a household, then they refuse to leave. They create a mess. Everywhere they go, they're just trouble. And you cannot, it is said that it needs at least 4 to 6 grown adults to take care of a grown monkey like that. Because they're so powerful, they're so cunning as such. On the other hand, the grey monkeys, they are more superior to the brown monkeys, and they understand this relation with them. They understand that the grey monkeys are stronger than them. They understand that the grey monkeys, they are much stronger, more superior. I would say, of course, I personally believe that the grey monkeys are much closer to us as compared to the brown monkeys. So, profession per se, if we talk about their profession, the grey monkey profession, then in these societies, people, they are going to call up a certain set of people that we have a monkey problem in our place. So they are going to come with a pet grey monkey on the motorcycle, and the grey monkey is going to sit on the back of the motorcycle. They'll be going to work, and then whenever he enters, as soon as the brown monkey sees him, they just run out of the window. They don't really have to do anything. On the other hand, the grey monkeys, they are more comfortable being with human beings as such. Even in Rishikesh, when you're going to walk around, you'll see the grey monkeys, they're trying to sit like human beings. Yeah. They're trying to sit with their legs crossed, spine straight. This literally trying to copy human beings in whatever they do. And that is why I think that the grey monkeys, which have a comparatively straighter spine as compared to the brown monkeys, they are more controlled, they are more closer to human beings as such. And that is why even in the ancient yogic culture, they were able to figure out the difference between monkeys and how, what is the key element that differentiates us from monkeys, what is the thing which makes it all different. The spine, in this video, we are just going to discuss the anatomical perspective of the spine. This yogic culture, we cannot figure it out here. I'm not smart enough for that. If you look at the shape of the spine right here, then this is the actual shape of the spine in case of every human being as such. This is just the shape of the spine. And if you see that even though in yoga we keep on stressing upon keeping a straight spine, please keep a straight spine, lengthen your spine, straighten your spine, but that is not the average, that is not the actual case that needs to happen in case of the spine. The spine is perfectly distributed to create these curves, this S-shaped structure, so to say, so that it can balance the body weight as such. There are various portions to the spine, there are various structures, even though in principle the spine is more or less made up of the same structure, more or less made up of the same vertebral columns, but they have their own differences, they have their own distributions when it comes to the size, the structure, and the amount of weight that they need to handle. The topmost part of the spine, which is running from the head and ending up at the shoulder somewhere, is called as the cervical part of the spine. Cervical part of the spine is also considered the neck area of the spine, and it is made up of 7 vertebral columns. In total, there are about 33 columns of the entire spine, but what we work with, what are actually movable in case of a human being, are about 24 vertebral columns, which are going to create the entire movable structure of the spine, something that all of us are actually working with on an everyday basis. The topmost part, as I told you, is called as the cervical part of the spine. If there are 24 vertebrae, it doesn't make sense that you have to have a name for each and every one of them. So anatomically, scientists, they have named the different names of these spines with the category that they belong to. 7 vertebral columns in case of the cervical spine, categorized as C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, and C7. In case of the thoracic region, which is more or less the chest area of the spine, is considered as T1, T2, T3 until T12, because there are 12 ribs in case of the human body, and all of these, the thoracic part of the spine creates attachments to the various ribs so that the entire chest area remains as it is. And this is the distribution, this is the distinguishing factor between the cervical spine and the thoracic spine. The lowermost category, the lowestmost part of the spine is called as the lumbar region of the spine. Now, the lumbar region of the spine is the most troublesome, the most important, something that you mostly deal with on an everyday basis, something which is more vulnerable as compared to the rest of the body. Of course, the entire spine is delicate in its own way, but at the same time, it's very strong in its own way as well. The lumbar part of the spine has only 5 vertebral columns, namely L1 to L5. Now, the thing to observe in this case is, if we talk about the names of these spines from C1 to L5, everything in between, only 2 vertebral columns, they get their unique names, which is not really as technical as just simply calling them C1, C5. The topmost part of the spine, the very first bone of the spine, is called as atlas. Atlas, can anyone think of why the name Atlas comes into the picture over here? Atlas, who was Atlas? So, you are from arts, right? You must have seen a Greek statue with a man bending and holding a big globe on his head, like this, right? He's bending over and he's resting the entire huge globe on his head over here. So, the space where the head is resting right here is called as the atlas. That particular bone is called as the atlas because it's resting exactly at the connection between the skull and that one particular bone. Why is it considered atlas as well? Because see, this face that we have as itself, we perceive everything with this face. We have all of these sense organs on this face. Through this we can touch, taste, smell, see, perceive, project things, create things, and exclude things from our mind. If we do not have these sense organs in the head, then this entire universe, which is so colorful, which has so many smells, which has so many things to do,
would have been more or less useless to us. And that's why it is said that the atlas bone is carrying the entire world on his head, particularly on that bone. Now, the thing to observe about that spine is that that particular vertebral column is shaped something like this. No body towards the spine, but a huge ring-like structure. The huge ring-like structure just works as the attachment between the skull and the spine. And the ring-like structure is there so that it can give space to the axis vertebral column, the axis being another special vertebral column of the entire spine, which is unique in its own way. Only the atlas and the axis bones, they are very unique. Apart from that, more or less the structure of the entire spine is more or less common, so to say. The second vertebral column of the spine, so to say, is the axis. The axis, as you can make out, is getting its name from the ability that it's able to rotate in left and right directions. Apart from that, there is nothing unique going on. If we think about the twisting of the torso, if we think about the structure of the torso, then it's obviously working in a gliding manner. If I have to twist the spine, then I cannot do it with a single spine. It is a combination of various different vertebrae which are placed stacked on top of each other that are able to make it happen. But on the other hand, if I just have to rotate the head, then as you can see right here, the second bone is twisting in left and right directions, only the second vertebrae. And that's why that is the unique characteristic of the axis bone. Apart from these two bones, there is nothing special going on them. Now, what I want you to observe here is that the thoracic part of the spine has an entire structure around it, right? Can you actually move your thoracic, can you actually move your rib cage at all? Partially because of the cartilaginous structure, but voluntarily you cannot do that. If there is any movement happening, then there's definitely going to be some sort of injury or damage, for sure, yeah? Which tells you that the most stable part of the thoracic region of the spine is the thoracic region, because it has body weight handled on the back as well as on the front side. That makes sense? Yeah? Which also tells you that it does not really need any sort of stability, it does not really need any sort of support. As you can see right here, the entire thoracic region is pretty stable, pretty structured as such, and at the same time, all of the body weight that it has is easily handled because of the solid structure that it's created, that is a gift of evolution to human beings as such. But the common thing between the entire spine is the lumbar spine as well as the cervical part of the spine. Why? Because while the lumbar part of the spine is handling the entire weight of the upper body, the cervical part of the spine is also handling the entire weight of the entire head. Now, tell me one thing, what do you think is the actual weight of this head that you carry on your shoulders? Guesses?
What is
This head, the total weight of your head, what is the weight of your head?
6
More or less.
Yeah.
Yeah. 5 to 6 kgs is the actual weight of an average head. Every one of us during, throughout our lives, obviously the weight of the body increases as we become older, but not too old. Eventually when we start getting older, then the weight somewhere increases. But from being a child to being an adult, an average adult's head weighs approximately 5 to 6 kgs. That means the entire weight of the 5 and 6 kgs that we have is handled only by the cervical part of the spine. The cervical part of the spine is the thinnest portion of the entire spine. As the spine goes deeper towards the sacrum, towards the pelvic region, the body of the vertebra. Now, look here. The entire thing, this front side, which is more or less a bony structure, is getting thicker and thicker by the time it reaches the bottom of the spine. On top, it doesn't really have that much weight. It doesn't really have that much structure. Eventually, as it goes deeper, it becomes stronger, it becomes bigger, it becomes thicker. That's because the entire weight of the body is handled by these lumbar, the 5 vertebral columns of the entire spine. And probably that is the reason why, even though, in principle, we are able to make so many movements with the cervical spine. All of the movements, adduction, abduction, extension, hyperextension, whatever you want to call it, they're all possible because the cervical spine is comparatively free as compared to the thoracic spine. But the attachments of the rib cage to the thoracic part of the spine, even though they provide a lot of stability, but they at the end of the day, they end up compromising on a lot of movement. Now, what kind of movement is, can you actually make any movement in the thoracic part of the spine? Can you twist the thoracic portion of the spine? Try it right now.
Twist.
Yeah. Stand up. Now, twist like this. Open your arms. Put one hand on the other shoulder. Twist as much as you can. And tell me, are you twisting from the spine?
No, from the spine.
From the lumbar spine or from the thoracic spine? Lumbar spine. Right. Now, put your hands around your shoulder and now twist as much as you can. Tell me, are you able to twist the spine at all? Twist as much as you can. At all. Open your arms completely. That's another way to twist the spine, and then twist the spine. Still, tell me, are you able to twist the thoracic part of the spine at all? Or is it happening from the lumbar part of the spine? Every kind of twist is going to happen from the lumbar part of the spine. Basically, what I'm trying to demonstrate is that the thoracic part of the spine does not offer any movement, does not offer any as such, predictions when it comes to even forward bends. How many of you can say that even in forward bends, the thoracic part of the spine is where the curvature happens? It does not. In any case, the thoracic part of the spine always remains stable, whether you're doing forward bends, whether you're doing backward bends. Obviously, there are going to be some cartilaginous stretching flexibility here and there because of the various attachments of the ligaments and the cartilage that it's connected with. But apart from that, as compared to the cervical and the lumbar part of the spine, there is no comparison between the movement of the thoracic spine. On the other hand, while it is compromising on a lot of movement, it is obviously supporting the body in case of protection, in case of more stability in the thoracic, the chest area of the spine. Now, don't get me wrong. Of course, eventually, because of a bad lifestyle as well, we end up developing a hunch towards the front side as such, which means that it's not going to happen instantly. It's not going to happen straight away in one day, in 1 week. Because of a lifestyle problem that you're obviously incurring every day by doing the same thing for months, years at a stretch, you can develop a permanent curvature, a permanent hunch in the spine, which is not just going to happen in case of the spine, but also in case of the shoulder area, which creates the entire thoracic region of the spine.
So one slight movement is there of the thoracic. Because of back bends, when we do back bends,
Stretching backwards.
Stretching of the thoracic. Thoracic region stops to have this kyphosis and it tends to have this opposite. In back bends.
You do it and then you show it to us
In
right now. Yeah, whichever you're doing, Chakrasana or anyone.